Hey, what is going on YouTube? So if you are looking to reduce your body fat, and I'm not talking about losing a little bit of weight, I'm talking about getting absolutely shredded to the bone, body fat like paper thin skin, then watch this video. This video is part of our education series. Without further ado, let's get stuck into this series. This first video is Fat Loss 101. So I am going to talk you through some of the fundamental basics, which some of you watching this video will already know, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail as to how we break through those plateaus and really bring the body fat down to the crazy levels. It's difficult, it's painful, but I'm going to tell you how to do it. To kick things off, let's talk about energy balance. Look, at the end of the day, you've heard this so many times, but it is about calories in versus calories out, and you're probably sick to death of hearing that. You see so many people talking about a calorie deficit, but ultimately you can't lose body fat without achieving a caloric deficit. Be that through a reduction in caloric intake and or an increase in caloric expenditure. Whichever way we need to make that happen, we need to make that happen. So what I would suggest is use a calorie calculator. We will link one in the description below. Click on that calorie calculator and that will tell you roughly how many calories you're going to need in order to lose weight. And if I'm honest, it's a spitball. It's not going to give you the absolute, perfect figure for you to lose weight. But we also need to talk about weekly calories. We can't just talk about daily calories. We need to talk about weekly calories, because so many people are absolutely on the ball with their diet Monday through Friday. But then, Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday, the weekend rolls around and you no longer stick to your diet because to some degree you've worked so hard all week, you've had your chicken and your salads and you've been in such a deficit, training hard, you've earned yourself a bit of a cheat at the weekend. This is one of the biggest places where so many people go wrong. You simply cannot out-train a bad diet, and it doesn't matter whether you've nailed it Monday through Friday. If we were to splurge on calories on Friday, Saturday or Sunday, even one meal could totally eradicate all of the positive work that you put in throughout the week. And I know that sounds crazy and I know that doesn't sound fair, but ultimately I don't make the rules. Let's say, as an example, and we'll show you a bit of a chart or a graph here to show you how this works. Let's say the total calories you needed throughout the week to create the caloric deficit was 2,000 calories per day, times that by 7, that's 11,200 calories for the week. That's the total amount that you're allowed to consume for the week in order to sustain your caloric deficit. Now, let's say, for example, you eat well below that 2,000 calories on a Monday through to Thursday, and you eat 1,600 calories instead of the 2,000. So you've banked 400 calories on each of those days that you didn't hit the 2,000. But the problem is, if we then add those calories, or at least try and think we're going to give ourselves a buffer at the weekend, those calories could top our total weekly calories and either keep us at maintenance or worse, bring us into a surplus where we're actually going to gain weight. What I would suggest is making sure that if you are going to calorie cycle and allow yourself some extra calories for the weekend, that even when you do have a bit more calories at the weekend, you still track them. You still have absolute awareness of them. And you can do this through apps like MyFitnessPal, tracking things on there, because you do ultimately need to have awareness. And so many of you are like, oh, but I don't want to track my food, I don't want to track my calories. Ultimately, it is what it is. Of course, you could do this without tracking calories, but you pretty much, for me, stabbing in the dark. But if you want to do this a little bit more effectively and efficiently, I would certainly recommend tracking your calories. Okay, then we need to talk about daily energy expenditure. So we've talked about the calories that we consume. Now what about the calories that we expend? Well, our body expends calories in so many different ways, not just from your exercise. And I think that this is where so many people get things wrong also, is that they think that they can out-train a bad diet purely through exercise. This is categorically impossible, and the graph and chart that I'm about to show you really will help you understand the reason why this is incredibly difficult to do. So daily energy expenditure is split into 4 different ways of tracking our expenditure. So we have the thermic effect of feeding, so when we are eating food, when we are chewing, when we are swallowing our food, that equates to about 5% of our daily energy expenditure. Now we can't change this, we can't start chewing a little bit more aggressively in order to increase that expenditure through feeding. So that is what it is, we can't change that. Then about 10% of our daily energy expenditure is through exercise activity thermogenesis, EAT. So that's when you actually train. That's when you are actually in the gym, putting in the work, hitting the iron, getting in some cardio. Only about 10% of your daily energy expenditure is through training. Unless you're going to spend hours upon hours in the gym, and I mean literally hours, it's really, really sad when you look at how many calories we actually burn during training. I mean, if you were to consume a tub of 𝗕𝗟𝗦𝗪s at 1,200 calories, if you were to try and subsequently actively burn that 1,200 calories, you would have absolutely no chance. It would take you a heck of a long time. I mean, you're running for miles in order to obtain that. So never get lost in that realm. This is why the diet is so freaking important. Then we have our 𝗕𝗓, which is our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Now, I've seen a number of different opinions on what 𝗕𝗓 stands for. For myself, I've always considered 𝗕𝗓 exactly what I'm doing now. I'm moving around. This is not exercise. I'm simply moving around, but I also attribute my step count and actually just walking around. I attribute that towards my 𝗕𝗓 also. Some people would say that's just exercise, and maybe there's an argument to be had there, but 𝗕𝗓 equates to about 15%. So never underestimate the importance of your 𝗕𝗓, how important it is to keep moving around. If you are sedentary, if you sit at a desk all damn day, you're going to struggle to lose weight, 100%. You could, of course, eat in a deficit. I would certainly recommend moving more so that your expenditure attributes to the weight loss as opposed to purely trying to do it from diet alone. It's going to make it a hell of a lot more miserable because your calories are going to end up so freaking low. I would much prefer for you to simply move more. So there's so many ways we can increase this. We can walk around whilst we're on the phone. We can maybe buy one of those walking treadmills, or we could just simply park further away from the gym, park further away from the supermarket. A lot of this is subconscious. You just subconsciously have a level that you move around during the day. I'm quite an extravagant person, especially when I'm presenting to you guys, so you can see I'm burning calories. Around 70% of your daily energy expenditure is attributed by your basal metabolic rate, your BMR, and that's just your body's amount of calories that it's burning just simply being, breathing, living. You have a set basal metabolic rate that you are burning calories at every single day. So if you weren't to even move, if you were to stay in bed all damn day and not move a muscle, your body would still burn, around 70% of your daily energy expenditure, okay? So there's not much you can do about that either. Arguably, you could build more muscle, but right now you're trying to lose body fat, so we'll talk about that another time. Then I want to talk about metabolic adaptation. Now, so many people get so far with their fat loss, their weight loss journey, when they're trying to get shredded, when you've got a holiday coming up, whatever it is you've got coming up that you're working towards, there will be a point where you will hit that adaptation, where your body has just hit a plateau and you are no longer still continuing to lose weight. Now, this is going to happen on your journey, no matter what, because as we start to lose weight, lose body fat, body's requirement for calories becomes less and less and less. For you at 200 pounds versus you at 170 pounds, your body doesn't need half as many calories at 170 pounds as it did at 200 pounds. So what are we going to do? And this is where we now start to look at strategy, as opposed to just throwing everything at the wall and hoping some of it sticks. And what do I mean by that? Well, starting with a caloric deficit, hitting cardio, as and when, not really having a rough figure in mind, just hitting a bit more cardio. A lot of people will start to train, they'll go a little bit lighter weight, they'll do a little bit more reps in order to burn more calories, but there's no real strategy. But ultimately, this is not a good solution, because what's going to happen is when you do hit that plateau, where are you going to go from there? What are you going to do when that adaptation occurs, when you hit that sticking point? And this is why we need a strategy where we are progressively bringing tools out of the toolbox, which is a term that I often use during myself and my clients' fat loss journeys, that we have tools in our toolbox and we will progressively bring tools out of that box as we go through the journey. When an adaptation occurs, when our body is now, stuck at the amount of calories that we're consuming, the amount of calories that we're expending, it's now stuck at that weight, what are we going to do? We're going to move the needle forward in some capacity. We're either going to eat less calories or we're going to increase our expenditure. It really is that simple, but if you don't have a strategy, if you aren't clear on the calories, if you aren't clear on how much you're expending, then where are you going to go? And it's also, you have to be cautious not to bring too many tools out of the toolbox too soon. That brings me on to the next part of the presentation, which is tools in the toolbox. We do need to leave as many of those tools in the toolbox as possible. And we have to consider what our minimum effective dose is. What's the minimum that we can do right now? How big of a deficit do we actually need to be making progress? And for sure, depending on the time scale you have, the level of expenditure needs to increase or decrease depending, so that you can peak at the end of when you are prepping for But that's why we need to have a strategy, and that's why we need to go with that minimalistic approach to start with, and only when we hit plateaus, then start to progress that. That brings me on to this kind of final point before we give you a bit of a summary, is you need to have your control panel set. Now this really is just my own visual representation of how both myself and my clients and my coaching team can visually understand what it is we are doing, how much we are consuming versus how much we are expending. And this is how we break things down. And it's very, very simple, and you can set this for yourself. So we set in place the calories, we set in place the protein, the carbs, the fats, and then we move on to our expenditure targets. Now this is just a very good visual way of understanding it. You know, if you was working with a computer, you would set the dials in place and you would assess the outcome. Same principle applies here. We can now say, let's set the step count, how many cardio sessions we're going to do per week, what's the type of cardio, so for example treadmill, how long are we going to do the cardio for, what's the intensity, how fast are we doing it, do we have an incline, you know, how many times are we lifting per week. All of these dials can somewhat be manipulated as the journey goes on. So we set the control panel in place, and this is exactly the way that we work with our clientele and the way that you can do this with your own transformation. Set your control panel in place. Be very, very clear how many calories, protein, carbs, fats. That's set. Now let's talk about expenditure. How many steps, how many sessions, what type of cardio, how intense are you doing that cardio, how frequently are you doing that cardio. When that's set, we can now monitor and assess the outcome. And if we are continually moving in the right direction, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you are on track and on trend towards achieving the outcome that you are looking for, which is crazy shredded condition, then don't change it. But the minute that we hit a plateau, that's where we can refer back to the control panel, have a look at what needs to be changed, move the dial, and then you crack on, and we assess the outcome through your weights, through your photos. Are we making progress? And that, in a nutshell, is how it is done. It isn't easy, especially when, you know, the dials are becoming manipulated to a level that probably in the long run is unsustainable. But listen, at the end of the day, if you're trying to get to crazy peak shredded condition, you need to know that it is an endeavor like anything else. You know, if somebody was to say, I want to climb Mount Everest, the goal isn't to get to the top and stay at the top. You're going to down die. Same principle applies when we talk about getting into peak shredded condition. Our goal, our job, your job is to get to the top of that mountain, put down your flag, take your photo, and then get somewhere safely back down the mountain. See it as an endeavor. Don't see it as the be-all, end-all goal that you're going to get there and you're going to stay there, because honestly, I promise you, you're setting yourself up for failure. You know, see it as an endeavor, see it as a challenge, see it as a reason to go all in and see how far you can actually push yourself. But what I honestly would recommend, and this is going to sound original coming from a coach who makes a living completely transforming people's bodies and lives, but honestly, if you are trying to go among this endeavor yourself, I implore you to give it a go all in. But ultimately, it's very, very difficult to keep your head in check, because the leaner we get, I would say, the less we actually see how shredded we are. And this is almost where that level of body dysmorphia comes in, or that emotional eye, when you are checking yourself in, when you're looking at your photos, when you're looking at how you look. You get past a certain point where you don't think you're getting any leaner, even though you are. And that right there is especially when we need that second pair of eyes. Even when I am dieting down, I utilize my coaching team, my head coach, to look after me, to check me in, to keep my head in check, and to make sure that, yeah, okay, Josh, you're doing exactly what you need to do. Keep on this path. Everything's great. So in that instance, honestly, it makes a world of difference to have somebody there in your corner, making sure that you keep your head in check and you feel super confident in what you are doing. And that's pretty much it. So in summary, make sure you're in that caloric deficit all the way through the process. And your caloric deficit at the beginning won't be the same as the caloric deficit at the end for most of you. You're gonna have to change that at some stage. Weekly deficit applies, not just daily. We need to make sure that over the entirety of the week, we are still creating and sustaining that deficit. Remember, adaptations will occur. You're not gonna stay consistent all the way through the process of just losing weight right the way until you're crazy shredded. That's not gonna happen. Adaptations will occur, at which stage you then have to continually move those needles to progress and keep moving forward. And we need to utilize our tools in the toolbox, all right? From beginning to end, have your tools set in place. Don't do too much too soon, because you're gonna burn out, you're gonna spend yourself, and there's gonna be nowhere left to go. And then also, the final thing for me is making sure you do it in a progressive manner. Other than rambling a little at the end, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. We have so many more education, mindset, and motivation videos to come just like this. If you liked it, please leave a comment. Let us know whether this helped you. And like, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and we shall catch you in the next video.